Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can all of you hear me?
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. Yes, Alhamdulillah.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Let's start, inshallah. Alhamdulillahi wa kafa wa salamun ala ibadihi allazina astafa amma ba'd. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. وكذلك بعثناهم ليتساءلوا بينهم قال قائل منهم كم لبثتم قالوا لبثنا يوما أو بعد يوم قالوا ربكم أعلم بما لبثتم فابعثوا أحدكم بورقكم هذه إلى المدينة فلينظر أيها أزكى طعاما فليأتكم برزق منه وليتلطف ولا يشعرن ولا يشعرن بكم أحدا سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. So inshallah, we'll continue with the Surah Al-Kahf. And previously we mentioned how the Ashab-e Kahf, they took sanctuary inside the cave, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put them to sleep for several years. And while they were sleeping, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected them in different ways. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved them from the direct exposure of sunlight. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would send angels. The angels would rotate their sides as they were sleeping. And here now there is a transition. And in this ayah, which is ayat number 19, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions about the Ashab-e Kahf and how they will be raised up from that sleep. And then what will happen after they are awake, and then what's the events of that story, as also, and also the hikmat and the wisdom behind the events that are going to take place. So the verse begins that وَكَذَلِكَ بَعَثْنَاهُمْ لِيَتَسَاءَلُوا بَيْنَهُمْ. But in this way we raised them up after they slept for more than 300 years, that we raised them up until they asked each other. Now, one of the things is, if you go back to the start of this surah, the mushrikeen, they asked the mushrikeen, the idol worshippers in Makkah Mukarramah, that asked this question of the Prophet ﷺ, that tell us about the Ashab-e Kahf. And one of the things which the disbelievers found very strange to believe was this idea, this belief about resurrection. That when a person dies, they'll be raised up by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of Qiyamah. And through this story, there is a proof for this life after death. We see a practical proof for that here. And this is a particularly important aqidah that a believer is supposed to have. The aqidah about akhirah, and the aqidah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will raise a person back up again once they die. And it's not just enough that we have this belief and we say this with our tongue, but if we reflect, we will realize that perhaps many of us, we have this belief, but we don't really practically implement and embody this belief in our life. And because of that, we don't have that conviction, that certainty about life after death and accountability before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is the reason why a person they end up slipping on their deen or committing things which are displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Person ends up taking bribe and stealing and lying and other kinds of acts which are displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It arises because of this weakness in our iman, and particularly this weakness in our aqidah about akhirah. So the story, the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we raised them up لِيَتَسَاءَلُوا بَيْنَهُمْ, until they asked each other. Now they're asking each other, and they're asking this question that how long were we sleeping? قَالَ قَائِلٌ مِّنْهُمْ كَمْ لَبِثْتُمْ. One of them said that how long were we staying? How long were we in this state of sleep, in this slumber? Whether it's a few hours, a few minutes, one day. قالوا, they said, لَبِثْنَا يَوْمًا أَوْ بَعْدَ يَوْمٍ, that we slept maybe for a day or a part of a day. قالوا, and then they said, رَبُّكُمْ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا لَبِثْتُمْ, that your Rabb knows best of how long you stayed, how long you slept. And then while they're discussing this question about how long were they sleeping, one of them, he says, فَبَعَثُوا أَحَدَكُمْ بِوَرَقِكُمْ هَذِهِ إِلَى الْمَدِينَةِ. So send one of you with this silver coin of yours to the city. فَلْيَنْظُرْ أَيُّهَا أَزْكَى تَعَامًا, and let him look around that which of the things that we can eat are the purest. فَلْيَأْتِكُمْ بِرِزْقٍ مِّنْ, and let him bring you some food from there. Now let's pause here and reflect upon a couple of things in this ayat. That they are sleeping, and now when they wake up from that sleep, they're discussing how long were we resting, a few hours, one day. And meanwhile, they're also quite hungry. And therefore, one of them, he says that, forget this discussion about how long we're sleeping, this debate, and why don't we go first and eat something? So they appoint one person that why don't you go to the city and get us something to eat and bring it back to us so that we can eat. What's the point of getting into this debate and discussion right now? That how long were we sleeping? Whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, we slept for that time. And this is not something to make a big deal of, a big fuss about. What we really want at this moment is to feed ourselves. And that's why they appoint this one person and task him with this responsibility of buying something from the city. And when they send this person to the city, they also send him with this instruction that فَلْيَنْظُرْ أَيُّهَا أَزْكَى تَعَامًا, that look around that which of the food is the most pure, not even halal. There is food that is permissible, and then there's food that is wholesome. These are two separate things. That they are asking for food that is not just permissible, but azka, tazkiya, pure, purest. And this is something very important to remember, that on this path of drawing close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our mashayikh, they say that wilayat, yani friendship and this closeness and nearness with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to attain this rank of being a wali, a friend of Allah, there are two things which are really important. One is rizq halal, and the second is sidq maqal. Rizq halal, that you eat halal. Especially when you're living in a non-Muslim country, there's so much doubt There are things which we are unsure about. And sometimes even there are labels which can be a bit misleading. It might say halal, but when you flip it, you find that this meat was machine slaughtered. And machine slaughters are actually not Islamically slaughtered. It's not halal. So one has to be really careful when we are in such a place, especially about the meat and the chicken, and also about other things, other edibles and eatables. This is directly linked with a person's spirituality, with a person's wilaya, with a person's ability to feel that closeness and nearness with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's the food that a person eats. Rizq halal. And I remember several years ago when I was when I was going for my PhD, and I came to Indiana for the first time in the US. And I asked one of my scholars, Islamic scholars, that if you can give me some advice, that while I'm at university, it's a new state, new place, what should I be really careful about? And he mentioned two things. The Sheikh said that one, be careful about your gaze. That in that open environment where people dress in a very open way, uh, particularly at universities and particularly during the summers, be careful about your gaze and safeguard your gaze. And second, he said that be careful about the food that you eat. And when I came to the university, especially Indiana, these were two big challenges. And I quickly realized that these are actually quite a formidable challenge because the environment is very open, very permissive, and it's hard to control a gaze for a young man. And similarly, food, especially in that state, in that place, in that region, we didn't have many halal outlets. And we had to travel all the way from South Bend to Chicago. That was about 2 hours just to be able to find some halal food, halal meat. But those are two things if a person can control. They can control their gaze, they can control their food, and ensure that they stay away from the haram. And not just the haram, they stay away from even the doubtful. And that's what this adhika is. That you just put a safe distance. It's more than halal. It's just more than permissible. That within the permissible, you want to be absolutely sure. Leave anything which is doubtful, which has the potential of being of being doubtful. Leave that, and also wholesome. So that will improve a person's spirituality. We see in the Quran as well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, Allah ta'ala, when He addresses the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that they should eat the halal wa amalan saliha and then do righteous deeds. And there is a link, the Mufassirin mentioned, there is a connection, a rabt between the two. That when you eat pure and wholesome, then Allah will give you the tawfiq to be able to act in a righteous manner as well. One day, our teacher, he was explaining this and gave a very beautiful analogy. He said that if a person eats something which is doubtful, and he was asking the students that what will happen? Do you think it will generate nur inside the heart of that person, or zulmat, or darkness? And we said that darkness, zulmat. And then when there is a darkness in the heart, when it generates darkness and blackness within the heart, zulmat, then will that lead to darkness in your thoughts and desires? Or will that lead to nur and light in your desires and thoughts? And we said that this will lead to darkness even in our thoughts and desires. And then those thoughts and desires, will they lead towards piety, pious actions, pious deeds? Or will they lead to acts which are displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, acts of disobedience and sins? We said sins. So we see there is a chain here that what you eat, it impacts your feelings, your desires, your thoughts. It first and foremost, it impacts your heart. It has a direct impact upon our heart. It's one of the windows to the heart. So if you eat haram, if a person eats doubtful, it generates a zulmat in the heart, darkness. And when there is zulmat in the heart, then very difficult for a person to be able to feel inclined towards doing good deeds. Rather, they will always feel that ibadah is a burden. They will feel that ibadah is a weight. It's weighty. It's too harsh. It's too strict. Even when they pray, they'll pray lazily. It'll be very easy for them, on the other hand, to commit sin. Very easy, on the other hand, to backbite. Uh, very easy to commit sin. But ibadah will become hard and difficult. There's a true story about a family, a couple who wanted their child, their boy, to memorize the Quran, to become Hafiz the Quran. And the child was exceptional in terms of his school studies. He was always get in a first position, quite intelligent, quite smart. But when they put that child into this HIFS program, and this is in the US, one of the states in the US, uh, it so happened that that child was studying for 1 year, trying to memorize the Quran. And 1 year passed, and the child was still unable to memorize even the last juz, the 30th juz. Was struggling. So during that time, our Sheikh Adiji, he was visiting that region for the bayan. And the family, they went up to the Sheikh and said that, Sheikh, can you make dua for our child? He's struggling, and we're not sure what the issue is. Because in school, he's acing all the subjects, getting first position. So it's not that he's not intelligent. He has that intelligence, that ability. But for some reason, when it comes to learning, memorizing the Quran, it's been 1 year and he hasn't even memorized this one juz, the last juz. So we don't know what the issue is, and we just ask you to also make dua. So the Sheikh said that, I want to meet the child. Is it possible? And they said, yes. So the child came and the Sheikh asked in a very light, relaxed manner, started asking that, how was your day? What did you do at school? And then when you came back, what did you eat? And within 5, 7, 10 minutes, the Sheikh said that I realized that what the issue was. Both parents, they were working professionals. Father would go to his office, mother, she was also working. So when the child would come back home, uh, there wasn't any home cooked food. They would just have these fast food. They would order these food from outside hotels or restaurants or fast food chains, KFC, McDonald's, these kinds of places. And that is what the child was eating. So the Sheikh, then he called the parents and he said that if you want your child to memorize the Quran, you have to make a promise to me. And the promise is that from now onwards, stop these foods from outside and just give your child home cooked food. No fast food, these fast food chains. This needs to stop. If you really want your child to memorize the Quran, you have to make this pledge and promise to me that from now onwards, you will stop all of this and serve your child food that is cooked inside your own home. And if you refuse to do this, then I'll take a back seat and I'll tell you that your child will never be able to memorize the Quran. Very difficult for your child to be able to memorize the Quran. So it's up to you. So it's very open about this with the parents. And the parents, they quickly understood and they said that, no, Sheikh, we promised that from now onwards, we won't give all of these fast food to our kids, to our child. And they upheld that promise. And then About a year later, when the Sheikh again came and visited that community, the parents, they went up to the Sheikh and said that, Hazrat, now our child, he has become Hafiz al-Quran. That same child who in 1 year was unable to memorize one juz, in the next year was able to memorize the whole of the Quran. And the Sheikh said that is actually about the food. You were feeding food, giving food that was doubtful. At best, it was doubtful. Maybe even haram, maybe even permissible. But it's not, certainly not this halal, rizq halal, tayyib, azka. Azka is even a greater category, even further. You have a rizq halal, then tayyib, then azka. It's the superlative form. Like you have akbar, you have kabir, big, and then akbar, it's the biggest. So you have pure food and then the purest. Azka is purest food. So it begins with the food, and this is something that we should be very careful about, whether we are living in a Muslim country, and especially so if you're living in a non-Muslim country, about the food that we eat, to avoid the doubtful, and eat rizq halal and tayyib, and preferably even azka, the purest. If you look at the 1 century ago, the Muslims were so particular about their food. Traditional Muslim families, they would wake up, the mothers, the women, they would wake up at the time of the Tahajjud. There's some amazing stories about women in this ummah, and how did the tarbiyah of their children, how they would prepare food for the family, waking up at the time of the Tahajjud and praying and doing ibadah, and then in a state of zikr, they would do the household chores, they would do the cooking. In their kitchen, they would be cooking, and they would also be reciting durood and salawat upon the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. They would be cooking, and they would also be in a state of wudu, in a state of tahara. So ideally, if you have someone who prays their salah regularly, someone who prays even tahajjud regularly, and they cook food in a state of zikr, in a state of tahara, then that food will have immense amount of barakah, tremendous amount of barakah. Every morsel that you eat from that food will bring nur into your heart. And that nur will give you tawfiq to do ibadah. Even if you don't feel like eating that food, will be like a spirit, not just physical nourishment, it will act like a spiritual nourishment. Spiritually nourish your heart. You will feel that elevation in your own iman. You will feel this, as if you're getting this tawfiq from Allah, this inclination, this yearning to wanting to do ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a very famous story about Imam Malik rahmatullah alayh and Imam Shafi rahmatullah alayh, that once Imam Shafi rahmatullah alayh came to Imam Malik's home as a guest. Imam Malik was the teacher, Imam Shafi was the student. So once he came, and Imam Malik rahmatullah alayh had two daughters, very pious, very muttaqi. And he told his daughters that, my daughters, today one very big scholar, one student of mine would be coming to spend the night, and I want you to prepare a food, lavish meal for him, and make arrangements so that he can spend the night and he can sleep, and then he will leave after praying Fajr. So uh, the daughters of Imam Malik rahmatullah alayh, they prepared the food, and they kept that food in the room, the guest room. They prepared the bedding, they prepared the water for wudu, and then they left. Imam Shafi rahmatullah alayh came, he was shown, this is your room, this is your food, this is your bedding, this is the water to make wudu at night for tahajjud. And Imam Malik rahmatullah alayh then went away and said, we'll meet you at the time of Fajr. Imam Shafi rahmatullah alayh, he started eating that food, and he ate the entire thing. There was a food cooked for about 3 or 4 people, but he ate everything. And then he slept, but uh, in the morning, uh, he tried to sleep, but the bedding seemed as if it was untouched. So what happened was in the morning when Imam Malik rahmatullah came to his door, he knocked and said, Imam Shafi, let's go for Fajr. They went to pray Fajr. Meanwhile, the daughters of Imam Malik rahmatullah, they started cleaning the room. And now, as they're cleaning the room, they are surprised. Number one, that they saw that the entire food was gone. And they were thinking that Imam Shafi would be like a scholar, a Zahid, someone who eats less. And here we made food for 3, 4, 5 people, and he did not leave anything. The entire food is gone. So that's number one. That was the first thing that surprised them. Secondly, they saw that the bedding and the mattress or the blanket, whatever it was, it remained untouched, as if uh, he didn't even sleep there. And thirdly, uh, the water that they had placed in a container for making wudu, that water was also still there as it was. And Imam Shafi rahmatullah hadn't used that water for making wudu as well. So they were quite amazed that who is this person? We thought he's a very pious individual and he ate everything and he slept uh, on the ground and he slept the whole night and then he did not even make wudu with the water and just went to pray Fajr. Uh, who is this person? What happened? What's the hakikat? What's the reality? So when Imam Malik rahmatullah came back, the daughters, they went up to the father and said that this is what we found in the room, and why don't you ask for an explanation? And Imam Malik rahmatullah went up to Imam Shafi rahmatullah and said that, what is your explanation? My daughters are saying these things about the room. And then Imam Shafi rahmatullah, he gave his own explanation. And he said, what your daughters are saying, they're absolutely true. When I started eating the food, I thought that this food is too much. I will eat only a little. But when I took the first bite, that first morsel, I felt so much noor coming into my heart. So much noor, so much radiance, light coming into my heart, that I realized quickly that this food is made by someone who is very muttaqi, very pious, in a state of zikr. And the asarat and the effect of zikr and the remembrance of Allah, I could feel that in the food itself. And as I was eating, I could feel that spiritual noor entering into my heart with every morsel. So I thought that this is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I should maximize on this opportunity and get as much noor as I can. So I ate everything with that intention of not knowing whether I'll get this opportunity ever again, to get this noor into my heart. So that's the answer to the first question. Secondly, that yes, I wanted to sleep and I came, and when I was sleeping, when I intended to go to sleep, but then I was unable to sleep. And the reason was because I started reflecting upon some masail in hadith. And this was the barakah of that rizq, that food that I ate, that there was so much noor that I was still feeling, I was experiencing within me, that as I started reflecting upon the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ, in that one night, uh, there was another thing as well, that there was a musalla that the daughters had laid down so that Imam Shafi could pray tahajjud. And when they came in the morning, they saw that that musalla was also folded as it is. So he hadn't even prayed tahajjud. And this was also one of the objections that they mentioned to their father. So Imam Shafi says that as I was reflecting upon the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ, in one night, I picked up one hadith, and out of this one hadith, I was able to derive more than 100 legal rulings because of the barakah of that noor in my heart. So it was quickly time for Fajr, and I thought that I would continue reflecting upon the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ, because this is more afzal to praying tahajjud. Engaging in one portion of the night in ilm, in an ilmi activity, and especially this kind of ilmi activity, where a person is thinking and reflecting upon the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ and extracting and deriving rulings from those ahadith, this is much more exalted than spending the night in ibadah in tahajjud. So I knew that this is the case, and that's why I thought that I will just spend the night, this night, I'll spend the night thinking and reflecting upon the ahadith, and that is why I did not pray tahajjud. And since I never slept during the night, I was awake throughout the whole night, I maintained my wudu. So that is why for Fajr, I did not need to renew my wudu. I just went out like this. So again, one of the lessons that we learn from this story is that when a person, when they cook, and this is something we can practice ourselves, and also share this with our families, with the women of our house, that try to cook food and prepare food in such a way that at least the person who's preparing food is someone who prays salah. That's the bare minimum. Sometimes we outsource this to cooks, and those cooks who don't even pray salah. And in some cases, people who are not even Muslims, people who are Christian, or people who are Hindu, or people who are other faith, and you're outsourcing the most important thing, that is the food, the cooking, the preparing of meal, which is the foundation, which is the basis. We are outsourcing that to someone who doesn't even believe in Islam, doesn't even pray their salah, or prays their salah, but lazily plays, they're not careful about their tahara, about their purification, about ritual purity, or they're preparing food while they themselves are in a state of rage and anger, and have their own issues, and when they're depressed and they're angry, and when the person himself is unstable, and they're cooking food in that state where they're unstable, and they have their own issues, that has an effect upon the food. It has an effect upon the food. Contrast this with that person who's praying tahajjud, cooking in a state of zikr, in a state of tahara, in a state of ritual purity, making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to put nur in this food. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put nur into that food. People who will eat that food, they will feel that nur. Their hearts will change. I remember, and this is again, I think, this is such an important topic that I think it's important to open this up. I'll share another story, again a true story about a woman in North Carolina. Several years ago, she was a Christian, then he reverted to Islam, and her whole family were still Christians. And it was her deep desire that she wanted somehow to convey the message of Islam to her family, her mother, father, siblings. But every time she approached the question of Islam, they would just shun her. They would just ask her to stop. So she would try, and she was always now on the lookout that what would be a good opportunity when I could explain this faith of Iman, faith of Islam. So she says that one day we were planning a family picnic trip, 3 days, and we went to this place, the tent, and were there for 3 days. And I took upon myself the responsibility. I said to everyone there that for 3 days I'll do the cooking. I'll prepare the meals. I'll take this duty. And she said that my intention was that in these 3 days, I will try to prepare food which is halal, which is pure, do so in a state of dhikr, in a state of tahara, and with this silent dua to Allah, that, Ya Allah, that these are people who, their whole life, they have been eating haram, impermissible. And Ya Allah, at least for these 3 days, Allah, I will try to feed them halal, the pure, the permissible. And I ask that you put barakah in this food so much that it can soften their hearts towards Islam. So she says, this was my intention. And day one passed, the second day passed, the final day, we were all sitting together as a family. And then one of my family members, she said to me that, why don't you tell us about your new faith? And I started telling everyone about Islam, the virtues of Islam, uh, how Islam is benefiting me in my life. And she says that, subhanallah, before that gathering ended, everyone, they recited the kalma and they became Muslims. Allahu Akbar. So there is a tremendous barakah in ensuring that the food that we eat is pure, wholesome, permissible. And we should never underestimate the importance of this in our life. Like I just mentioned at the start, our mashayikh, they say that wilayat. What is wilayat? Wilayat is the greatest spiritual rank a person can get. What is a wali? Wali, Allah Ta'ala says, Allah inna awliya Allahi la khawfun alayhim wa hum yahzanun. That a wali, a friend of Allah, is that person who has no fear in their life, no sadness. Well, it's a very high spiritual rank. What is the manner? What is the way to attain that rank? Our mashayikh, they say the two things are the base. Number one, rizq halal. And second is sidq makal. Sidq makal means to speak the truth. Now that's a separate topic. And there is uh, a sheikh, Hazrat Khwaja Ghulam Ali Dehlvi Rahmatullah alayh, he would say that once I was invited to a gathering to eat food, and that food was doubtful. It wasn't haram, it was just a doubtful. And because of eating that doubtful food, all of my spiritual kayfiyat, I lost them. I lost all of my good spiritual kayfiyat. And then I came back to my sheikh and explained my situation, that I ate this one doubtful morsel and I lost that eagerness for ibadah, that sweetness in salah. I lost all of those kayfiyat. And then the sheikh told me that you should do istighfar every day and continue doing istighfar, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. Keep doing that. And eventually, after 40 days, continuously doing istighfar, then finally I was able to regain that same spiritual sweetness in my ibadah, in my salah. So that is why we should be very careful about the food that we eat. This is one of the faraiz of eating, that we see whether it is halal or not, whether it is pure or impure, whether it's doubtful or not. The reason why this is so important is from another angle as well, that in one hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that that person who eats haram, their dua will not be accepted. I mean, it's not just the food. Again, this is the principle that keeps coming up, that the food will impact your ibadah. You can't separate the two things out. Look, this hadith is teaching us that the food that you eat, if it's haram, your du'as will not be accepted. There's a very famous hadith in Sahih Muslim, long hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ said that there was this one person who returned back from a very long journey, and he was quite worried, and his hair was all scattered, and there was all mud and dust over his face, and he was in a desperate situation. And in that state of desperation, he raised his hands up to the sky and he's making dua, Ya Rabbi, Ya Rabbi, oh my Rabb, oh my Rabb. And in that hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that wa mat'amuhu haramun. But this is that individual whose food is haram. وَمَشْرَبُهُ حَرَامٌ. And the drink, the things that you have, the liquids, the fluids, the drink is haram. وَمَلْبَسُهُ حَرَامٌ. And his clothing is also unlawful. وَغُذِيَّ بِالْحَرَامِ. And he's nourished on the haram. He's raised up on the impermissible. فَأَنَّا يُسْتَجَابُ لِذَلِكَ. Then how can such a person's dua be accepted? So today, if we complain that I make so many duas, my duas are not accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have we ever asked ourselves this question? Have we ever done this introspection? That maybe the reason why our duas are not accepted is because maybe our food that we eat is not totally halal. Maybe what we're eating is doubtful. There are elements and traces of haram in that. This is muhasaba, that we need to do muhasaba, take ourselves to account. Think before we put anything in our mouth, whether this is halal or not, whether this is tayyib or not, whether this is pure or not. Our akabareen, early Muslims, the Salaf Salihin, they would do so much, they would have so much caution in their life that they would look at a product, not just the product itself, but the manner in which that product was produced, all the way, the whole process, like, like the agriculture, the farming, and then the tree, and then the fruit, and then all of those contracts and transactions that happen from the start till finally the food, you buy the food from the supermarket. They'll go all the way back into that whole process, that whole chain, that supply chain, and see whether all the processes that were happening in a lawful manner or not. Now, that's not technically required. What we are technically and legally required is simply the last transaction, that you just ensure that what you're eating, that item is halal, and secondly, you're buying that with halal income. That's legally and technically what a person should be concerned with at the bare minimum. But taqwa is that you can go all the way back and you can see the whole process, the supply chain, and ensure that everything in that chain is halal. That's some of the early Muslims, the Salaf Salihin, they would go to that extent in their level of caution. Hazrat Mirza Mazhar Jane Jana Rahmatullah alayh, once a person came to him and presented him with some grapes and said, Hazrat, why don't you have these grapes? And the Sheikh, he refused. And then again he insisted that, Sheikh, please eat these grapes. And then the Sheikh remained silent. When he insisted the third time that please eat these grapes, I brought these grapes for you as a gift. So then the Sheikh said that, how can I eat these grapes when I can smell the when I can smell the smell of corpse coming from these grapes? And that person was stunned that the smell of a corpse coming from these grapes. How? Why? I know I bought these grapes in a halal, in a permissible manner. So what is the Sheikh talking about? So that person, he went to the shop from where he had bought the grapes and said that I bought these grapes from you. And this one person was very close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's saying that how can I eat these grapes? I can smell the smell of corpse coming from these grapes. So where did you get these grapes from? So he told this address that I got these grapes from that person. So next day, he went to that person. And that person said that actually I got these grapes from this place which was a graveyard. And I had made this graveyard into my own land. It was actually a graveyard, not my land. But I just occupied that land illegally and used it for grape plantation. And that is what the hakikat, the reality is. So, as someone who wants to draw close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we should be careful about our eating and drinking and abstain from things which are doubtful. فَلْيَنْظُرْ أَيُّهَا أَزْكَى طَعَامًا فَلْيَأْتِكُمْ بِرِزْقٍ مِّنْهُ. So that was the first advice that they gave to him, that get the purest of the food. Second, وَلْيَتَلَطَّفْ. And then when you speak to people in the market, speak in a polite manner. Speak softly. Now this word وَلْيَتَلَطَّفْ, if you ever look into the Quran and if you ask this question, that what is the central word in the whole of Quran, the middle word? And if I were to map down all the words in the Quran and look at the center, the central word, such that before that word and after that word, there are equal words in the Quran, what is that word? That word actually comes here in this surah, Suratul Kahf, and it's this word, wal yatalattaf. This is the central middle word of the whole Quran. And in many mushaf, it's written with bold, in bold, slightly, it's enlarged. And here comes the question that what is so significant about this word? That out of all the words in the Arabic language, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose this word to be the central word of the whole Quran. And the answer the Mufassirin they give is, it's because the meaning of this word is so beautiful. Wal yatalattaf, that act with softness. Act with kindness. Act in a polite manner. This acting softly, speaking softly, this amal, this deed is so beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you speak softly with others. You act with softness with others. This deed is so beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose this word to be the central word of the whole Quran. In other words, indicating that this is the central key idea of the whole Quran. If someone wants to know the key central idea, this is the word. That act with softness with everyone around you. Wal yatalattaf. Those people who are harsh and rude and strict, not soft, Shariat does not like such a person. Shariat likes that person who has softness in their nature, who have softness in their heart, who have softness in their tabiyah. Such a person is beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this softness, in one hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves softness. Allah ta'ala himself is soft and he loves softness. And when you bring softness in any matter, in any affair, it only adds to the beauty and excellence of that matter. By adding softness, you only beautify that matter, that deed even more. So softness doesn't corrupt any deed. It only adds beauty. It only enhances that action. And one of the greatest examples of softness and how important softness, acting with softness and speaking softly, that is in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is to reflect upon that episode when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam and Sayyidina Harun alayhi salam to Fir'aun. When they sent Hazrat Musa alayhi salam and Sayyidina Harun alayhi salam to Fir'aun. At that time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave an advice that when you speak to Sayyidina, when you speak to Fir'aun, فَقُولَا لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا. Speak to him softly. And Mufti Muhammad Shafi Rahmatullah alayh, in the commentary of this ayah, he mentioned something beautiful. He says that two Anbiya alayhi salam, Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, Sayyidina Harun alayhi salam, are being instructed to go to Fir'aun. That Fir'aun who used to claim divinity for himself, who used to say, Ana Rabbukumul A'la, that I am the Lord of everyone. I am the Lord of the whole universe. So he's not just committing some sin. He hasn't just committed some misdemeanor or some crime or a small sin or a big sin. This is the biggest sin, that he is denying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, claiming divinity for himself. He was a tyrant. And yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is instructing Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam that when you go speak to him, speak with softness. فَقُولَا لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا. And the lesson here that we take is that if we speak to someone and the other person has made a mistake, you speak to your driver, you speak to your cook, you speak to your family members, your spouse, you speak to your parents, your relatives, your friends, you speak to your colleagues at work, to your friends at school. Right? These are people around you. Let's assume that they did something wrong. They made a mistake. Let's assume they made a big mistake. Even if it's a big mistake, even if they're bad, Allah Ta'ala is teaching us that no matter how bad they are, they cannot be worse than Fir'aun. They cannot be worse than Fir'aun. They cannot be like a tyrant. They cannot be a tyrant like Fir'aun. And on the other side, let's say you are pious, you are virtuous. Let's say you are muttaqi. Let's say you pray your salah, you pray tahajjud, you're regular in your salah, you know deen, you're a religious person. But even if you're a religious, pious person, a friend of Allah Ta'ala, close to Allah Ta'ala, the lesson here is that you cannot be better than Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam. You cannot be like Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam. Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, he was the Kalimullah. Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam is still more exalted than you, has a greater spiritual rank, superior rank than you. And yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, who's way, way, way better than us, that when you speak to Fir'aun, who's way, way, way worse than anyone around us, whom we speak to, that when you speak to Fir'aun, فَقُولَا لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا, speak with softness. And that's the lesson for me and you, that we who are much less than Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, and when we speak to people who are much less worse, not that bad as Fir'aun, when we speak to them, then all the more we should also speak with softness, with kindness. So may Allah Ta'ala give us the tawfiq and this ability that we can inculcate this sifat of softness within us. It's difficult. People become angry. In their anger, they want to be strict, they want to be harsh. But anger comes from shaitan, and deliberation comes from Rahman, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This ability to control our anger, control our rage, not give in, just to swallow that, this is the sign of a true believer, a sign of a believer who's loved by Allah Ta'ala. Wal kazimin al ghaiz. Allah praises such people in the Quran, that these are people who swallow their anger. Wal kazimin al ghaiz. Wal afina anin nas. And they forgive the other person. Not only do they swallow their own anger, they forgive. And they do ihsan, they do good, they excel in doing good with that person. So if someone wrongs you, you swallow your anger, you forgive them, you have forbearance, and then you respond to that evil with goodness. This is the ta'aleem and the teaching of our deen. Hazrat Hassan radiallahu ta'ala an, once he had a servant to help him with different household chores, and she was bringing something for him, and accidentally she tripped, and uh, it all of it spilled over, and Hassan radiallahu ta'ala became really angry. So when she saw the anger, she immediately recited the ayat of the Quran, wal kazimin al ghaiz, that those who swallow their anger. And upon listening to this ayah, Hazrat Hassan radiallahu ta'ala an, he swallowed his anger, became completely normal, did not react. And then she continued with the next part of that ayah. Wal afina anin nas. That they forgive people. They forgive others. And upon hearing this, he immediately replied and said that, okay, I forgive you. And then she recited the last part of that ayah, that inna Allah yuhibbul muhsineen, that indeed Allah loves the people of ihsan, loves the people who do good towards others. And upon hearing this, Hazrat Hassan radiallahu ta'ala, he said to her that, okay, I set you free. You're free to leave. You're free to go. This is how the Sahaba Ikram used to do amal upon the Quran. The ayat would be recited here, their amal, their deed would change. So controlling the anger and acting with softness, with kindness towards others. And then the last advice, last instruction they gave to this person. So first instruction was that go to the city and bring food for us, but ensure that what you get is the purest. Second, wal yatalattaf, that when you speak to people in the market, speak with softness in a polite manner. And third, wala yush'iranna bikum ahada, and you must not let anyone know about you. And the reason is because we don't want people to know our secret. Just keep a low profile, in other words. Keep a low profile. Do not engage in some dispute or some argument. Don't pick a fight. Don't ask questions unnecessarily. Keep a low profile when you go into the city. And there is a deep lesson in this part for us as well. That if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses a person with some uh, let's say good dreams or some spiritual sweetness, or some what we call secrets of the batin. Right? There is something, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses a person with. So generally, we should not reveal that before common people. That I had this dream and I saw this and I was blessed with this and I got this. We should conceal. Yes, if we have a relationship with a sheikh or some alim scholar, so we can share that dream with them. We can ask them what this means, and uh, we can share such information with such kinds of people. But with the general masses, one should try to conceal as opposed to reveal, lest other people become envious. Because envy is something which is natural. Whenever a person gets a blessing, it's natural that other people will become envious about you. And when people have envy, then you will become the object of their envy. And this is something from which a person is supposed to take refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدٍ. Because that hasad then comes to you, that you become the target of enmity, of hostility, of malice, hatred, spice, and people then try to harm you or hurt you. So this is again to be on the side of precaution, that you don't reveal all of your spiritual secrets to everyone. Do so with your sheikh or an alim or a scholar, but not with everyone. And just to end this, they also explain that innahum yadharu alaykum, that if the inhabitants of the city were to know about you, if you engage in excessive asking and some pick a fight, or you don't keep a low profile, but you go there in a particular manner, carrying yourself, acting in a pompous way, then all eyes will be upon you. And if the people find out about you, then yarjumukum, they will force you. They will do rajam, they will stone you. Aw yu'idukum fi millatihim, or they will force you to return back to their faith, to idol worship. Walan tuflihu idan abada, and in that case you will never find success. So inshallah, let's keep it till here today. And inshallah, we'll continue with verse 21 next time. We end with dua that may Allah Ta'ala enable all of us that we can inculcate these sifat and attributes within us. These are this is a very beautiful, this verse number 19 in particular. It's a very beautiful verse of this whole surah. It's also contains the central word of the Quran. But these are very deep lessons, deep, important lessons, fundamental lessons, basic lessons. And like we say, that the basics of Islam are not things that we understand basically in a simple way. They are the basis that we need to incorporate, inculcate, and be established upon in our life. So food and speaking with softness and generally keeping a low profile. In a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that man tawaza'a lillah rafa'ahu Allah. That whoever acquires humility for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will raise that person up. The Sahaba Ikram, you find this sifat within them. They would keep a low profile. Sayyidina Siddiq Akbar radiyallahu ta'ala an, once the Prophet ﷺ said about him that if anyone wants to see, said to the Sahaba, that if anyone wants to see a dead man walking on the face of this earth, look at Abu Bakr. Yani, he's someone who has raised himself completely. Such humility. And we know that because of that humility, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave such an incredible rank. Siddiq Akbar radiyallahu ta'ala, the greatest of all the Sahaba Ikram. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the ability and the tawfiq to act upon these teachings. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Yes, is it permissible to feed your pet cat food which is not pure? Yes, yes. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الله
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. جزاك الله خير.
يبارك.